Imagine this: a young woman, beautiful, ambitious, and fiercely independent, walks into a room where a billionaire CEO waits. He offers her a deal that seems too good to be true, millions of dollars for just one night. No strings attached. No questions asked. She accepts, thinking it's a transaction, a simple exchange of time for money. But what she doesn't know is that this night will change her life forever. The CEO doesn't just want one night. He wants her. Forever. And he's willing to do whatever it takes to make that happen. Sounds like the plot of a thrilling romance novel, right? But what if I told you this story is real? What if I told you that every twist, every turn, every heart-stopping moment actually happened? By the end of this video, you'll know the truth. You'll find out why she said yes, what happened that night, and how one decision spiraled into a web of passion, power, and obsession. But be warned, this isn't your typical love story. This is a tale of desire, manipulation, and the lengths people will go to for love or control. So grab a seat, because you're about to dive into a story that will leave you questioning everything you thought you knew about love, money, and the price of saying yes. Let's start with her. Let's call her Emma for now. Emma is the kind of woman who turns heads wherever she goes. She's not just beautiful, she's magnetic. But behind that dazzling smile is a woman who's been through more than most people could imagine. She's worked hard to build a life for herself, but life hasn't always been kind. When the offer comes her way, it feels like a lifeline. A chance to finally breathe, to finally have the freedom she's always dreamed of. But here's the thing about lifelines: they can also pull you under. And Emma is about to find out just how deep the water goes. Now let's talk about him. The CEO. Let's call him Alexander. He's the kind of man who's used to getting what he wants. Power, wealth, success, he has it all. But there's one thing he doesn't have: her. And for Alexander, that's unacceptable. He's a man who thrives on control, on ownership. And when he sees Emma, he doesn't just see a woman. He sees a prize, a challenge, something or someone to conquer. But here's the twist: Alexander isn't just a cold, calculating billionaire. There's a vulnerability there, a crack in the armor. And that's what makes him dangerous. Because when a man like Alexander falls in love, it's not gentle. It's not kind. It's all-consuming. And Emma is about to be caught in the storm. From the moment they meet, the chemistry is undeniable. It's electric. But it's also complicated. Because this isn't just a story about love. It's a story about power. About who has it, who wants it, and who's willing to lose everything to keep it. As the night unfolds, secrets are revealed, lines are crossed, and the stakes get higher and higher. But here's the question: what happens when the sun comes up? What happens when the deal is done and the money changes hands? Does Emma walk away, or does she stay? And if she stays, what does that mean for her? For Alexander? For both of them? I know what you're thinking. You're thinking, this sounds like a fairy tale, or maybe a nightmare. And you're right. It's both. Because love isn't always sweet. Sometimes it's messy. Sometimes it's dangerous. And sometimes it's worth everything. But here's the thing: you don't know the whole story yet. You don't know what happens next. You don't know how this ends. And that's why you're here. That's why you clicked on this video. You want answers. You want to know the truth. And I promise you, by the end of this video, you'll have them. But be prepared. Because the truth isn't always pretty. Sometimes it's heartbreaking. Sometimes it's shocking. And sometimes it changes everything. So let's dive in. Let's start at the beginning. Let's start with the night that changed everything. The night Emma said yes. The night she walked into that room, not knowing what was waiting for her on the other side. The night she made a deal with the devil, or maybe an angel. Because here's the thing about Alexander: he's not just a man. He's a force of nature. And once he sets his sights on you, there's no escape. But Emma doesn't know that yet. Not until it's too late. Not until she's already in too deep. Not until she realizes that the money, the power, the glamour, it's all just a facade. A beautiful, dangerous facade. And by the time she sees the truth, it's already too late. Or is it? That's the question, isn't it? That's what keeps you watching. That's what keeps you hooked. Because you want to know. You need to know. What happens next? Does Emma get her happily ever after? Or does she lose everything? Does Alexander get what he wants? Or does he lose the one thing he can't live without? The answers are coming. But first, you need to understand the stakes. You need to understand the players. And you need to understand the game. Because this isn't just a love story. It's a battle. A battle of wills. A battle of hearts. And only one of them can win. So, stay with me. Keep watching. Because the story is just beginning. And trust me, you don't want to miss what happens next. Emma's life before that fateful night was anything but glamorous. She grew up in a small town where opportunities were scarce and dreams often died young. Her parents worked tirelessly to make ends meet, but it was never enough. Emma learned early on that if she wanted more out of life, she would have to fight for it herself. She moved to the city with nothing but a suitcase and a determination to carve out a better future. She worked odd jobs, studied late into the night, and sacrificed more than most people could imagine. But no matter how hard she worked, it never felt like enough. The city was unforgiving, and the weight of her struggles began to wear her down. That's when the offer came. A mysterious message from an unknown number, offering her a way out. A way to change her life forever. At first, she dismissed it as a scam, but something about it lingered in her mind. The promise of freedom, of security, of a life without constant worry. It was too tempting to ignore. And so, against her better judgment, she said yes. Alexander, on the other hand, was a man who had never known struggle. Born into wealth and privilege, he was groomed from a young age to take over the family empire. But beneath the polished exterior was a man haunted by his own demons. His father, a ruthless businessman, had instilled in him the belief that emotions were a weakness, that love was a distraction. Alexander had spent his life building walls around his heart, focusing solely on power and control. But when he saw Emma, something shifted. She was different. She wasn't like the women who usually flocked to him, drawn by his money and status. She was real. Raw. And for the first time in his life, Alexander felt something he couldn't control. He wanted her, not just for a night, but forever. And he was willing to do whatever it took to make that happen. The night they met was unlike anything Emma had ever experienced. The venue was opulent, the kind of place she had only seen in movies. Alexander was waiting for her, his presence commanding the room. He was charming, but there was an edge to him that made her uneasy. As the night unfolded, they talked, they laughed, and for a moment, Emma allowed herself to forget.
Daniel, too, was beginning to question his loyalty to Alexander. He had always admired his boss's ruthlessness, his ability to get what he wanted no matter the cost. But now, watching Alexander's obsession with Emma consume him, Daniel couldn't help but feel a growing sense of unease. He had seen Alexander destroy people before, but this was different. This wasn't just business. This was personal. And Daniel knew that when emotions got involved, things had a way of spiraling out of control. He tried to talk to Alexander, to warn him about the risks, but Alexander wouldn't listen. He was too far gone, too consumed by his need for Emma. And so, Daniel found himself at a crossroads. Should he stay loyal to the man who had given him everything, or should he follow his instincts and protect Emma from the storm he knew was coming? The unexpected twist came on a night that started like any other. Emma had agreed to meet Alexander at his penthouse, hoping to finally confront him about the messages, the photos, and the growing sense of dread that had taken hold of her. But when she arrived, the penthouse was empty. The lights were off, the air thick with tension. She called out for Alexander, but there was no response. And then, as she stepped further into the room, she saw it. A single envelope on the table, her name written in bold black letters. Her hands trembled as she opened it, her heart pounding in her chest. Inside was a single photograph, one that made her blood run cold. It was a picture of her and Alexander, taken on the night they first met. But there was something different about it. Something off. And then she realized, the photo had been altered. In the background, barely visible, was a figure she recognized. It was Sophia. Emma's mind raced as she tried to make sense of what she was seeing. Why was Sophia in the photo? And why had it been hidden from her? Before she could process the implications, the lights flickered on, and Alexander stepped out of the shadows. His expression was unreadable, his eyes dark and intense. He didn't say a word, just stood there, watching her, waiting for her to react. And then finally he spoke. "You thought you knew the truth," he said, his voice low and dangerous. "But you don't even know the half of it." Emma's heart sank as the pieces began to fall into place. This wasn't just about her and Alexander. This was about something much bigger, much darker. And as the realization hit her, she knew one thing for certain. She was in way over her head. The stakes had never been higher, and the game had changed in ways neither of them could have anticipated. Emma was no longer just a pawn in Alexander's world. She was at the center of a web of lies, betrayal, and danger that went far beyond anything she could have imagined. And as the truth began to unravel, one thing became clear: there was no going back. The storm was here, and it was going to destroy everything in its path. But who would survive? And who would be left to pick up the pieces? The answers were coming, but not yet. Because the worst was still to come. And when it did, nothing would ever be the same. The room felt like it was closing in on Emma as she stared at Alexander, her mind racing to piece together the fragments of the truth he had just hinted at. The photograph of Sophia in the background of their first meeting was no accident. It was a clue, a breadcrumb leading her down a path she never wanted to walk. Alexander's voice cut through the silence, cold and deliberate. "You think you're the victim here, Emma," he said, stepping closer. "But you're not. You've been a part of this from the beginning. You just didn't know it." Her breath hitched as his words sank in. What did he mean? How could she have been a part of something she didn't even understand? Before she could demand answers, the door burst open, and Sophia stormed in, her face pale but determined. "Emma, you need to leave. Now," she said, her voice trembling with urgency. But it was too late. The game had already been set in motion, and the players were all in place. Sophia's arrival only deepened the mystery. She wasn't just Emma's best friend. She was the key to everything. As the truth began to unravel, Emma learned that Sophia had been working with Alexander all along. It wasn't a betrayal out of malice but out of desperation. Sophia had been blackmailed, forced to play a role in Alexander's elaborate scheme to test Emma's loyalty and resilience. The messages, the photos, the threats, they were all part of a twisted game designed to see how far Emma would go, how much she could endure. Alexander had wanted to know if she was strong enough to stand by his side, not just as a lover but as a partner in his world of power and danger. But the plan had spiraled out of control, and now, no one was safe. Emma's world shattered as she realized the depth of the deception. The man she had fallen for, the friend she had trusted, they had both lied to her. But as the pieces fell into place, she also realized something else. She wasn't the same woman who had walked into that room months ago. She had been tested, broken, and rebuilt into someone stronger, someone who refused to be a pawn in anyone's game. With a steely resolve, she turned to Alexander and Sophia, her voice steady despite the storm raging inside her. "You think you can control me," she said, her eyes blazing. "But you're wrong. I'm done playing by your rules." What followed was a whirlwind of revelations and confrontations. Alexander's empire, already teetering on the edge, began to crumble as Emma exposed the truth to his enemies and allies alike. The rival company that had been closing in seized the opportunity, launching a full-scale attack on his business. But Alexander wasn't the only one who paid the price. Sophia, torn between guilt and loyalty, made a desperate attempt to make things right. She handed over evidence of Alexander's illegal dealings to the authorities, knowing it would destroy him but hoping it would set Emma free. The fallout was swift and brutal. Alexander was arrested, his empire dismantled, and his name dragged through the mud. But even as the world celebrated his downfall, Emma couldn't shake the feeling that something was still missing. The final twist came on the night of Alexander's sentencing. Emma, now free from his shadow, had started to rebuild her life. She had cut ties with Sophia, unable to forgive her for the role she had played, and was focusing on her own future. But as she sat in her apartment, trying to move on, there was a knock at the door. She opened it to find Daniel standing there, his face grim but determined. "There's something you need to know," he said, handing her a sealed envelope. Inside was a letter from Alexander, written in his unmistakable handwriting. It was a confession, but not the kind she expected. He admitted to everything, the lies, the manipulation, the games, but he also revealed something that left her speechless. The entire scheme, from the very beginning, had been orchestrated not just to test her but to protect her. Alexander had known his enemies were closing in, and he had wanted to ensure that Emma was strong enough to survive without him. His love for her, twisted and flawed as it was, had been real. Emma's hands trembled as she read the final lines of the letter. "I wanted forever with you," Alexander had written. "But forever was never mine to give. So I gave you the next best thing. A chance to live without me." The weight of his words hit her like a tidal wave, and for the first time, she allowed herself to feel the full depth of her emotions. Anger, grief, love, and regret all swirled together, leaving her breathless. She didn't know if she could ever forgive him, but she also couldn't deny the impact he had on her life. He had broken her, but he had also made her stronger. And in the end, that was his final gift to her. The story of Emma and Alexander was not a fairy tale. It was messy, painful, and deeply flawed. But it was also a story of resilience, of finding strength in the face of adversity, and of learning to let go of the past. As Emma stood there, holding the letter that changed everything, she realized that she had finally found the freedom she had always wanted. Not the kind of freedom that came from money or power, but the kind that came from within. She had survived the storm, and now she was ready to live. The screen fades to black, leaving the audience with one final thought. Love can be beautiful, but it can also be dangerous. And sometimes, the greatest love stories are the ones that teach us the most about ourselves. This is the story of Emma and Alexander. A story of passion, betrayal, and the price of saying yes. And it's a story that will stay with you long after the screen goes dark.